What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Facts on the Ground. I'm Misty Winston. I am joined as always, or as usual, because sometimes not always. I am joined by my co-host, Jesse Zerwell. Today, I'm excited to have a really active organizer and activist, and he's a writer. He's been published in 3 different languages. He's somebody that I consider to be, I guess, a friend now. We care about a lot of the same things. So Eric, Harvey, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hello, thank you for having me. And that's the first time I hear you refer to me as a friend. I feel the same way, and it makes me feel warm inside. So thank you.
Look at us being all like positive and full of love and hope. Look at us. That's usually that doesn't happen often.
We all took acid before this.
Yeah, no, my like appearance of fatigue is due to the cold. No acid for me, but
no. Stop it, because you do this every time I talk to you. He just works too much, you guys. He's just always tired. And every time I talk to him, he is tired and doing something and doesn't know what time it is.
Yes.
It's a funny thing.
Right.
So Eric, let me ask you, what is the thrust of the activism you're doing, and how did you get started with it?
Getting started with it. So my interest in Julian resumed April 2019. Seeing the photos of him dragged from the embassy, it broke my heart. My ex-wife had introduced me to the story through the Benedict Cumberbatch film, and me just be kind of intellectually, inclined, decided to spend, quite a bit of time looking into the actual story. Took a bit of a break from it when college and grad school were overly demanding, but then, that absolutely disturbing set of circumstances outside the embassy redirected me to that. And, just my belief in the need for radical freedom of information in terms of like real democratic processes, and then also the real type of self-determination all humans deserve. That led me to Assange defense, and also just set me on this workaholic schedule of writing, preparing for the Illinois State Bar, and organizing Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And okay, so you just mentioned something that I think we should talk about, because I don't think people talk about it enough. But it's that like the radical right to like information and truth and knowledge, because I very deeply believe in that, because I think that the people who have the power and control are psychopaths, and I don't want them to ever be able to do anything that I can't know about. And I don't think a lot of people recognize how vital that is to being able to be free. Like, people talk about freedom all the time, but if you don't even know what's happening around you and are very easily propagandized and manipulated into thinking something that's not reality, like, that bothers me tremendously. So, how important is that for you? Like, because I stress about that all the time. And I feel like people just don't take it seriously enough, that their right to know things is being taken away from them. No, they're giving it away.
Just necessarily due to the nature of language and words, right? There's already a traumatic disconnect between, the expression of ideas and what those ideas or what those expressions refer to. And then there's an additional element in terms of government secrecy, which, an even greater abstraction occurs when the inability to refer to ideas or the set of circumstances people occupy is even worse. And so actually I viewed Julian as almost a storyteller, or actually any journalist this way. In other words, people who are, collapsing that disconnect, or attempting to, such that there is a real way to understand yourself in the world. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Yeah,
no.
it does.
Yeah. I mean, he gives us source documentation.
Yeah,
that's what I think is so vital.
Storyteller in an abstract sense, because these words, right?
No. Yes, but I'm just saying that, like, that you talked about like removing that gap, and that gap is just like, what is the truth? Because everybody has their own perspective, everybody has their own opinion, whatever. Julian Assange doesn't give us that. Like, WikiLeaks in general gives us source documentation, 100% authenticated and verifiable source documentation. Nobody's ever disputed it. They've never gotten it wrong. So to me, that's invaluable. Like, that, yes, they still are storytellers. They're telling a story just through information itself. But the fact that they just give you the truth. And yeah, Julian Assange does interviews and he talks about things and he, you know, throws some opinion and stuff, but what they offer you in terms of their publications is nothing but truth. And I can't imagine not fighting for that. It's weird to me.
The other thing too is he's just he wrote the introduction to that book, The World According to Empire, the WikiLeaks files, and he is also, you know, you wouldn't expect this from someone with a tech background or whatever. He's just a brilliant writer, and the way he cuts to the it's profound. It's profound.
There's I don't mean to interrupt you, but just on that point, I tweeted about this twice in the past, over the past several years, but he wrote this review of Luke Harding's book called something like The Snowden Files. And Luke Harding from The Guardian was not even involved in breaking the Snowden leaks.
Too. Ooh.
Yeah, and he's also written unverified, well, lies about Julian Assange.
Mm-hmm.
And I just encourage everybody to find that Newsweek review from 2014, because not only is it well written, but the way he dismantles the propaganda back then, 7 years ago, 6.5 years ago, is still so relevant today. So just on that point, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think everybody should read that because it's so instructive.
Yeah. I mean, the way he, in the introduction to the WikiLeaks files, the way he just so succinctly deconstructs the relationship between information and how it circulates through civilization, and then how power structures within civilization and then civilizations in general organize themselves. It's just like such a beautiful idea, and just outgrowth from feelings, little feelings I've had about, you know, all that occurs around us. But really that informs a great deal of my passion for this, and the ability I guess I have now to work 20 hours a day or so. Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah, I get the 20 hours a day thing sometimes. Yeah, but I mean, that's kind of been it for me. Is it frustrating for you that other people don't seem to grasp how serious this is? Because I vacillate between being extremely mad at people and also just like trying my best to remain patient, because I know not everybody's on the same part of their journey, and you know, and I get it. But it's still just very frustrating because we are really, 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 really close to losing everything.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not sure people appreciate that the threats go beyond, you know, abstract ideas about freedom of the press. Well, that is actually a very concrete, and I even say spiritual or visceral idea. I think it goes beyond that to, well, literally very spiritual in terms of, you know, I talked about the disconnect between symbols and the ideas they refer to, but you know, the idea of self-determination, the very nature of existence in terms of like invariably interpersonally and in relationship to massive structures, right? There is always a power dynamic, and people's ability to exist in the world, realize themselves in so many regards. I would say everything from highly bureaucratized systems and systems of oppression, right? They go down to affect the spirit, people's ability just to exist as human beings. So it's not so much just freedom of the press or democracy, or maybe this is a false dichotomy with people's self-determination and then everything from the spirit to the body in a political sense, really. I think there is only the political, you know, yeah, so the threat is far more substantial than I think people appreciate.
Yeah,
and of course, those ideas could all be the same if you look at the way the founding fathers had articulated these things. Of course, they were problematic insofar as they only afforded these rights to a very small subsect of our original population. But anyway, you were going to say something.
I was just going to comment that one of the main things you're talking about here is the use of language, or the distortion of language, even down to the point where you look at how Julian Assange was kidnapped from the Ecuadorian embassy in London. But in the mainstream media, at least, we often read that he was
removed,
taken against his will, something.
I don't even know. I don't even.
Something of the
carried
sort.
out of. Yeah.
And we're seeing it again now with what's happening in Palestine. But the point I want to make is that, or just to add on to your point, is that it sort of reifies these things in a sense, but in a way that they become not they don't seem real. They seem like ethereal or part of another reality. And I think that's done on purpose through the language, through the depictions, the pictures. Like the only picture you ever see, and I realized that there weren't that many photos taken, but the only picture you really ever see of Julian being kidnapped from the embassy is the one where it looks like he's trying to get away and he's yelling because these goons are kidnapping him and he knows what he's going to face. And there's also that reification of it too, making it into this thing where that's Julian Assange. He's always causing trouble. He's a rabble rouser. He's a rapist, and it's done on purpose.
He's a hacker. He's a Russian spy. He's a
Right.
loser. He smears cat poop on the walls. He rides a skateboard. I mean, they have smeared him so many different ways over the past, 10 plus years. And it's been like a very systematic destruction of his character.
Oh, sure. I mean, Noam Chomsky, I can't, I mean, I came across this article over the winter, but quite some time ago, I think, I mean, it would have been recently enough that Julian was starting to exhibit sort of the decrepit appearance, but Chomsky was observing that in, I guess, The American Machine and elsewhere, there's a preoccupation with people's appearances. And, he was observing that one of the tactics is to draw attention to the long, even Socratic beard, or just the haggard look, right? And more or less, he was referring to like, we need not only speak about words here, like symbols in general and the visual presentation of things, but Chomsky was saying like, oh, this is a very strange, false way to discredit someone. But a co-organizer actually here in Milwaukee mentioned to me, I hadn't been aware of this, is that officials in the embassy, or actually I think maybe it was the people in UC Global, had taken his razor and done that, right, so that they could present him that way. And then actually on the day of the decision,
as in present him as suicidal or possibly suicidal.
Yeah,
just haggard looking. They just wanted him to look bad.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing too, I noticed. So I Googled, I was refreshing my browser to see immediately on the day the blockage was issued against his extradition. And, I actually fell asleep on my computer because I was so exhausted. I woke up a few hours later. 3 articles came up when I Googled, extradition decision. 2 of them were New York Post articles. And in the first and second, I remember the first well, there was this writer referring to, oh, look, he's like this, egoistic character played by the sexy Benedict Cumberbatch. And honestly, there's an interesting thing there, right? The guy contextualizes in his first paragraph who Julian is based on a movie star. Right. And then goes on to like continue this description in terms of like abstractions.
Yeah, they load the dice from the start.
Yeah, and then it's just the last line was like, oh, send him to the States and we'll deal with the rest. But yeah, so the presentation of symbols, distortions, right? Taking the razor, the white facial hair long, right? It's just a very unfortunate tactic towards discrediting, having nothing to do with the substance of his character.
Yeah, and I think decontextualization is a huge part of that too, because why does he have facial hair like that? Why is his hair turning white? Why does he look so feeble? It's because he's been under basically...
He's been fucking tortured.
Yeah, tortured and under ghettoization in the Ecuadorian embassy. That's what's going to happen to you when you're isolated. I've already had physical problems occur to me from staying in due to COVID. So I can only imagine, or maybe can't even imagine, what he's gone through and what he's going through now.
Sure. Oh, I get that. Far from 175 years in solitary confinement, but the loneliness that I have from time to time experienced, and I still was uncharacteristically social against the backdrop of so many people who quarantined religiously, but I have, 3-4 days rarely without contact with people. It's not good.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And it's not only that, he couldn't see a doctor. He couldn't take care of any health problems. He couldn't see a dentist. He couldn't leave. Like he can't even like step outside. If he steps outside, they will arrest him. So that's no sunlight. That's no and he's in a tiny space in an Ecuadorian embassy, which if you've seen the building and old UK buildings, it's tiny. He had a very small space in which to live in. And he had to depend on people coming to visit him, and
yeah. And there's that one shot in Juan Passarelli's excellent film where I think it's taken from a surveillance camera that they had installed in his living quarters, but he's basically in a robe and he sits down with a cup of tea, I think it is, and just crosses his legs and just starts drinking tea. And I don't know what he's thinking about, but he's obviously pontificating. But you can see there just the kind of isolation and sort of rumination and self-introspection he was forced into, but not in a positive way.
I mean, the other thing I want to remark is maybe it's interesting that, right, Noam Chomsky, what is his original discipline? And consider how much of a political celebrity he is and how much a pioneer of very interesting thought on political structures and political science in general. What is his original discipline? He's I mean, from what I understand, a linguistics professor, right?
Right.
He studies language. So, you know.
Yeah, that sort of brings it full circle a bit. I haven't read much of Chomsky on Assange, but from what you're saying, it sounds like he's been very vocal or quite vocal about Assange's freedom.
Yes. Well, he's always been very pretty bold on First Amendment. Like he's an absolutist, like free speech for even people I hate, which that's, I mean, there's definitely, listen, I think Noam needs to maybe like stop talking.
Yeah.
Because his lesser of two evils bullshit just pisses me off. And I just don't do it to me, Noam. Don't do it to me, please.
He's been riding that train for a while now.
I know he's always been that way, but it sucks every time he does it. But yeah, he is definitely an absolutist. And I would say he was fairly influential in my absolutism. You know what I mean? Because he made it make sense. He made it make sense to me.
Yeah.
That's the only way to go.
I mean, in a conversation with someone recently, they had mentioned maybe all people shouldn't be involved in the political process. And I understand this person's, well, they self-identify as a liberal. And I was thinking, well, okay, maybe Proud Boys should not be involved. But at the same time, I did refer to a statement that Chomsky had made, which I thought was compelling, which is that, like, say, look at some of the major worst dictatorial authorities in history, say Stalin or Mussolini, who only provided for free expression amongst people they endorsed. And then also look at the corresponding set of like fascistic oppressive mechanisms that they perpetuated and really just used to destroy people's lives. Do you really want a reproduction of that in the United States and elsewhere in the world? And then, of course, I think Chomsky's argument then implied there, and I haven't read the full thing since college about 10 years ago, but is that actually a First Amendment absolutism is a remedy for that and a way to maintain like the alternative, right? An actually democratic society in the truest sense of that term, democratic. One in which people are not oppressed in the way those authorities, the dictators that I had mentioned, Mussolini and Stalin were.
Stalin and Lenin, I think, are some of the most egregious criminals in human history. And it really stokes my ire how many people on Twitter lionize them now without really knowing any of the history and calling certain things that Stalin absolutely did false or exaggerated. And I think that if Julian were alive during those times, he would be exposing those people, Mussolini, for all the crimes they've committed. He wouldn't be standing back and taking this sort of sentimental communist perspective. And they always like to add Marxist onto it, never realizing or never wanting to acknowledge that Marx died long before, or at least decades before, the Russian Revolution. So I'm glad you point that out, because not many people do. And there's still so many fetting over Lenin and his philosophy, apparently, and Stalin and his philosophy.
It's okay to like be like, hey, that person who is not perfect and did some shitty things said something cool, and I like what he said about that thing. And that's it. There's no fucking ability for people to separate. Like, do you know what I'm saying? It's the fan club thing. It's the fangirl thing. It's like they do with the Squad, and it's like they do with.
It's the epitome of cult of personality.
Yes.
And I'm not, that doesn't mean anything that Stalin said or Lenin said that might have been spot on. That doesn't mean that it's,
because they said some good shit. I get it.
That doesn't negate it, but I just find a lot of people, they will find these things that all of these dictators, and they were dictators, they were tyrants, that they've all said, and then use that to justify their whole lives and everything they did, especially with like Lenin and Stalin. Oh, as soon as they came into power, they were under attack by counter-revolutionaries. And it's, read the history. These were madmen who were assassinating out of paranoia what turned out to be millions of people. And I know those who are all about what's happening with the rise of neo-Nazism in Ukraine are probably going to pillory me for that if they even watch this. But I think neo-Nazism is on the rise in Ukraine. But point being, I'm glad you brought that up. And I think that in that time, Julian Assange would have criticized that, and he wouldn't have taken this sort of mealy-mouthed approach that's based on a cult of personality and some false sentimentality.
Yeah.
Well, I think Julian doesn't have like heroes. You know what I mean? He just exposes. He just tells the truth.
Right.
He just whatever truth he can expose, that's what he does. I don't think that, like, people like to attribute, political leanings or affiliations or party affiliations, or that he helped Trump, or that blah 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 blah. And I just don't think that any of that's really all that accurate. I'm sure he definitely has his own biases for sure, but that's not what WikiLeaks does. What they show is just the facts, and he's exposed. That's why I tell people all the time, there's a handy dandy search feature on wikileaks.org. Before you start saying, oh, well, how come he never leaked anything on enter the, fill the blank there. He has probably, and you just haven't bothered to go look.
Right.
He's exposed pretty much every major government on every country on earth.
I
most
recall,
major corporations.
Yeah, I recall one of the he had said, reading a speech from the Ecuadorian embassy that I watched on YouTube, that they have literally released documents on every single country in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I believe this was a speech, probably, I don't know, possibly, no, 7, 8 years ago, but and that would suggest that he's not necessarily anti-American or anti this or that. He's
pro-truth.
Right, exactly. He's not, exactly. Right.
I think that's the only thing he cares about, really.
So you mentioned earlier, Eric, that it was in 2019 when Julian Assange was kidnapped from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, that was a sort of catalyst for you to get involved in activism with regard to Julian Assange. But as I'm sure you know, the Collateral Murder video came out in 2010. And that was really, even though WikiLeaks had been doing work before that, that was sort of the impetus that put them on everybody's radar, or most people's radar who pay attention to.
That's when I started paying attention.
Geopolitics. So back then, did you pay attention to any of that, or was it just sort of on the periphery for you? And then once you saw what happened in 2019, you were like, okay, this is beyond out of hand.
My greater immersion in the story occurred, with my ex-wife, who is actually significantly older than me, 9 years older than me, having much more familiarity and just, I guess, at that age, just greater awareness of things going on. But, it had begun with that sort of like in narrative fictional form. And then I went on to kind of familiarize myself with the actual factual issues. But no, I recall mention of it, and, Julian was a household name, or at least becoming that. One of the reasons I was so, not as focused on things beyond like my immediate sphere was because the college I went to, while it was extremely countercultural, and there was mention of Julian on campus, it was so demanding that I rarely had time for anything other than, I don't know. I did take courses in which I had the privilege of reading Chomsky, which then I could apply to these things later. Or really, Reed College was a maddeningly intense experience. And so my world, I guess, like a lot of college students, was pretty insular. And there are plenty of politically active people on that campus. I don't know. I just couldn't get my nose out of a book. And then in some respects,
that's fair though,
because I can take the theoretical frameworks I learned there and kind of bring them out into what I do now. But so it's a long-winded way to answer your question. Maybe it sounds like an excuse, But actually,
No, yeah, we're not
yeah.
like judging you on your
Yeah,
level of involvement or your
um,
date
Oh
of
no,
entry. Or
no.
I'm
I mean,
just
it's a legitimate question, right? No,
I'm just
because
curious how it
we like
built up for
origin
you.
stories.
Yeah, I'm curious.
We're a
We're,
big
we're
fan of
curious
origin
how it built
stories.
up for you
Yeah.
and
Because
came
I
to where you
have
are now.
like kind of a similar story. I was definitely much more engaged after collateral murder. Like that was that was for me, that was pretty pivotal seeing that. So but yeah, I mean, and I paid attention then. I was a fan. I followed the work. I, you know, bought merch and donated and all that stuff. But I wasn't like super, not like I am now. You
yeah,
know, I really didn't get hardcore involved until he was dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy, which was shocking to me. It was shocking to me that he was still there, but then watching him get dragged out was shocking. Like it was a shock to my system, and I realized that this is legit. They're doing this.
yeah.
It's time to fucking go. You
Oh, by the
know?
way, I wasn't offended by that question. I did get the sense that you were interested in origin stories, and I suppose
Okay.
when you look at someone who is willing to sacrifice their health, like me, in terms of a cause like this, you'd wonder, oh, maybe the interest in awareness is far more deeply rooted in at least my brief history in 33 years on this earth. So, but yeah, no, that's anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but we do have kind of similar stories, I guess.
yeah.
so Misty, obviously, if you follow her, she is involved with a bunch of shows and very active with Assange and particular communities that are fighting for Assange's freedom. Are there any communities like that that you're a part of, Eric, or that you've started perhaps in the Chicago area?
Oh, in terms of podcasts or the organizing?
In terms of organizing
Oh,
and bringing
Yeah,
awareness
that's what he does.
to Julian
yeah,
Assange. Yeah,
yeah.
I'd just like to know if you can give more details about your work and anybody else or any other groups you might work with.
Sure. Well, I mean, really, the only activist group is Assange Defense, which is, one of the, I guess, subsidiary nonprofits under, the Courage Foundation, headed by Nathan Fuller. And, I think it was probably 4 months ago, I was placed on the site and indicated to be, at first, unbeknownst to me, I found out a little later that I would be responsible for kind of mobilizing Chicago. That was a bit difficult, right? Because people are not as comfortable meeting in person, but that has looked like organizing Zoom conferences. There's only been one so far, given how recent this capacity was assigned to me, but I will do those. And so Mohammed El-Matsi, that amazing journalist.
I love Mo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Friend of the show.
Yep.
He's a really generous with his time.
Yes,
Kind of
he
guy.
is.
Yeah,
I
he's a
talk,
great guy.
I signal a lot. But so it was Mohammed, and then also a professor of anti-terrorism laws that is in Egypt primarily. That they appeared on this and delivered some statements in regard to the extradition proceedings. So it's that kind of thing. But now, actually, as of early April, there was a protest that I organized on the 2-year anniversary of his being kidnapped from the embassy. That was fairly small. It was it's just like the country's opening up, and it I think it will improve.
Yeah.
The next thing, of course, is actually it's nice to be able to mention this on this podcast. Is the 17th and 18th. I've been asked to organize something around John Shipton's and Gabriel Shipton's visit to the States, and I guess they will be in Chicago.
They're going to be in Columbus too.
Oh well, yes. I mean yeah.
I'm very excited.
Oh, I am very excited too. I'm actually going to become more familiar with the details tomorrow when I meet with Nathan. It'll be kind of one of the first times I'll substantially discuss the assignments he's going to give me in regard to that. So this is what the activism looks like under Assange Defense. One of the reasons, I mean, these kinds of activities have not required the amount of time I will work. What I have found that writing I do independently of them actually dovetails very much what they do. And then actually, I've been able to develop this kind of global attention starting in January with Nils Meltzer and then kind of extending to this German publication and the UK and everything. And so my independent work kind of, I guess, not necessarily entirely independent, has kind of increased my ability to attract people. And yeah, so there's a lot going on, but I guess that's the answer to your question.
So you're not just isolated to Chicago or the Chicago area.
Yeah, actually, and I mean, I think that helps in a number of regards.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, I mean, actually, who's also really like such a sweet and generous guy is I tend to be talking to Juan Pasquarelli.
I love Juan.
A couple times a week, and it's amazing. I never thought some fairly anonymous guy in Chicago from the Midwest would be able to connect with these political heroes of mine, and it's been very cool. But also, they're just very helpful and kind of drawing attention to
and dedicated and passionate and smart and insightful. Yes, I love all these people. Like I gush about Juan all the time because he's I don't know, like just like the first time I talked to him, I'm like, this guy, like this guy, I like this guy. Yeah, I love Juan. So
yeah, he was really generous to come on the show and give us some of his time a little while back. So
I mean, a while back when we like didn't have that many like subscribers, we were really just kind of getting started out, and he came.
Well, that was
on.
you. That was your connection that made that work. So.
Well, that's just the vigil. He was on the vigil, and I was able to use that. But yeah, he was very generous to do it. So I love Juan. I'm really excited for the Shiptons to come to the States. I'm really pumped about that. I'm hoping you're right that like now as things are opening up, we're going to be able to get some more people out, because that's really, I mean, we talk about it on the vigil all the time. I think that's where we're going to make the most difference is in person. It's so hard to convey to people the seriousness of this over like a Zoom meeting.
Sure.
Like being able to have conversations with people and like have that like personal interaction where you can, examine somebody's like little micro, all that stuff. Because it is a very complicated issue. This whole, I know you hate that word, Jesse, I'm sorry, but the whole Julian Assange saga is a decade long shit show, and it's a lot to unpack, and people have a lot of questions, and there's a lot of things that you have to, but I mean, that's all possible, but it's just much easier to do that in person, I think.
Right. I mean, Americans already live in a significantly thick bubble, and then add the alienation of a computer screen to whomever is chatting with you, and my God, that bubble just grows exponentially, doesn't it?
Yes.
So,
yes.
But I think if people are exposed, well, not I think, I know if people who previously disagreed with Assange or didn't know anything about Assange or WikiLeaks, or just have bought into the sort of, or the mainstream media narrative of he's a rapist, he's an egotistical hacker. Yeah. Those people's minds can be changed if they are, I suppose, patiently, although I don't know if we have time to be patient, but patiently provided the correct or factual information. And I cite my parents as an example of that, because they fully support Assange and WikiLeaks and his freedom, and WikiLeaks' freedom to publish as they do. And they previously weren't like that. And it took me about 1.5 years of sort of poking them with new information.
It's a lot.
Yeah, but they did get it. And so it is possible to educate people, and I would say even change their minds, or just
for sure
get them to look more seriously at it. But
I've even managed to do it on Twitter. It's hard.
Yeah, the problem is that it takes time, and again,
we don't have that.
Right.
We're out of that. Almost entirely. I mean, I don't know if I can stress this enough, but we are literally, and again, I'm not even going to say we're losing. We are handing over our First Amendment rights rapidly. It's happening very quickly at this point. We've talked about the anti-protest bills that are up in like 34 different states. I think like 29 of them have already passed, or maybe it's 31. 29, 31, I think have already passed. There's like 70 something more that are in various stages of development or whatever. And so, and you see it with the anti-BDS stuff. They're trying to pass laws against BDS. You can get fired for saying something bad about Israel at this point. We are handing over our ability to just say things, know things, read things, hear things, whatever.
Sure, and then I mean, and then the desire or the passion to subvert that, right, is manipulated insofar as, you know, Kamala Harris tweeted on Press Freedom Day
Oh,
some applause of how, you know, so just like, oh, what a holiday, or it's like, you know, we need to observe this, right? Well, that's just kind of an anesthetic against what really is going on. Then I kind of thought the Khashoggi Act, you know,
yeah.
was sort of a distraction away from.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Did
you
you
know,
say Khashoggi?
no, the Khashoggi, you know, the
They,
act.
yeah, there was a piece of legislation that was written that,
Khashoggi, who was murdered
yeah,
by, okay.
Yeah, and you know, that's great insofar as at least ostensibly it would point to a respect for journalism and freedom of.
But he wasn't a journalist.
Oh, yeah, Khashoggi.
Yeah. He wasn't a
Oh,
journalist. He was a columnist at best, and he was probably a CIA Saudi asset.
oh no, I mean, regardless of that, right? What I mean to say is he's marketed as a
as a
figure.
journal. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so I'm
Yeah.
again talking about the difference between what is presented or marketed and what actually is. But what I was
Got
saying,
you.
well, this points to, right, I would say it's kind of like Kamala Harris drawing attention to this holiday and giving the impression that she stands for this. Well, okay, fine, introduce this Khashoggi Act and give the impression again that the US is about respecting the lives, human rights, freedom of journalists. But at the same time, why isn't there a Julian Assange Act?
Right.
Yeah.
Instead, it's the exact opposite,
Well,
right?
I mean, when
Trying
the
to kill
president
this
of
guy.
Azerbaijan can embarrass the shit out of you as a BBC journalist, and he can come on there being that guy, and he can throw it in your face and just dismantle you. Still, I mean, listen, you guys, you don't have to come for me and say you can't praise that guy. Do you know who he is? I don't give a fuck, you guys. What he did to that BBC journalist was beautiful, and it was necessary, and he can still be an asshole, and that can still be a fucking awesome moment, because that was great. And that needs to happen more often. I mean, because that's the truth, that we have no moral, like, there's no moral high ground here. The UK and the US have no room to talk whatsoever about human rights abuses, about their love for press freedom, and about their love of democracy, and all of that bullshit that they love to throw platitudes up about. Literally vomit them up, I think. Yeah, that, you guys, you don't even know. I wake up every Press Freedom Day, or every anytime there's like something like where politicians are gonna blow smoke at my ass about press freedom. Every time that happens, it's like, I know it's so annoying. Oh, the platitudes, it pisses me off. And I think what pisses me off even more is that I know there are a certain percentage of the people who fall for that bullshit. And because they just don't know, and they're busy, and they think that, you know, Joe Biden's a nice guy, and he's, you know, weird Uncle Joe, and they just don't know. They watch MSNBC, they think Rachel Maddow is a legitimate journalist. They think that Vladimir Putin like controls all the things. You know, and I get it, but it's just really frustrating
And
to deal with.
Hezbollah is in Venezuela still.
Oh, you guys. And that's what we're up against, though. That's why I say all the time, the battle for narrative management and against propaganda is it. That's it. That is the front line for everything else, because you are not going to be able to have an effective conversation and figure out the shit that you care about if you can't have a legit conversation. And we are at the point right now where we can't have those legit conversations, and we are being manipulated constantly. It's all around us. It's in every commercial. It's on every magazine cover. It's in the clothes that you buy and the stores that you shop at. It's everywhere. You're getting bombarded constantly by manipulation. And I know that sounds conspiratorial. I don't give a fuck, because that's what's happening.
No, I don't know that it does. It does sound very accurate. Data mining and all of that, and these bizarre.
I mean, listen, they know everything. They know everything about you. They know where you shop. They know where you live. They know where your kid goes to school. They know what kind of car you drive, what kind of shoes you wear, all of those things. And you don't know jack shit about what they're doing. And it's supposed to be the opposite. We're supposed to have privacy as the people, and they're supposed to be terrified to step out of line. And that's why we need 1,000 WikiLeaks across the globe doing what they do, and exposing. Seriously, people in power should be terrified of us. They should be afraid to be corrupt, or, you know, like, that's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way it should be. If they're going to be positions of power, which I would argue that we don't need those. But if there are going to be, there needs to be just unbelievable accountability and transparency, straight up. You don't get to like rule over me or have any level of power or authority over my life without just unbelievable accountability, because I don't trust you.
I don't even want that though. I don't care if they're accountable. I don't want anybody to have any sway or rule or
No, that's what I'm
control over
saying
my
though.
life.
I would argue we don't need positions of power.
Right,
But
right.
if we're going to, which we do currently in this system, then there needs to be an immense amount of transparency.
Right. And that goes back to something Shahid said when we interviewed him, which I disagree with, but he said that he sees the what currently passes for democracy in the United States as the only system to work within to make a difference. And I completely disagree with that, but I think that is the mindset of a lot of people. And I don't think it's because they're stupid or ignorant or arrogant, but we've been so conditioned to think inside of this box of supposedly legislative politics, and it's so embedded that so many people can't think outside of it. And that's not to say that like we're enlightened and they're not, again, but I think as long as that's happening, there's, at least in the US, there's just going to be stonewalling with Assange. And I think they've kind of wiped their hands of him now that they don't have to deal with the extradition, and they're kind of leaving it up to the UK to figure out
Which
what they
they'll
want to
drag
do
it
with
through
him.
appeals.
I mean, the other
Yeah.
thing too, in terms of you had mentioned conditioning, and maybe you mean conditioning in a way other than the way I'll discuss it in a moment. But people are so overwhelmed with everything they have to do to survive. Some people is simply as putting food on the table to keep their children alive. And some people in far more complicated ways, but in other words, submitting to sort of American dream type narratives of what fulfillment looks like. It's almost, I mean, I think these mechanisms are very well reinforced and like just embedded in what we experience here, that people have very little time to think. And there's a huge de-incentivization around thinking. We know so well academics are not paid very well, mostly, right? Writers. I think a friend formerly from CNN who now works at Law 360 a couple of months ago had posted an article he came across. I can't remember the publication, where it says that most writers will like never make beyond I don't know, a few $1,000s in their entire lives of writing, or something along those lines. I'm probably misquoting the dollar amount, but what I mean to say is that was the argument, or that was the observation in the article. But these purveyors of information, right? These people who try to understand what really occurs in things, or kind of like what I had mentioned, Julian, is the collapse of that dichotomy I'd mentioned. That is like the most sorely underappreciated work ever, right? And the work that is appreciated is based on illusion. For example, like what is the abuse of like the monetary system, which is not based on a gold standard. It's very, very abstract, and belief in the faith of a standardized value of something. And people who will abuse that system, what do we see? People at hedge funds making so many money. They're capitalizing on an illusion, right? I don't know if that makes any sense. So
No, it
Yes.
does. It's money that doesn't even exist.
yeah.
None of it exists. It's
Right.
all made up. It's a figment of your imagination.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to bring that up too, because that's part and parcel of what we've been talking about with the machinations of empire that WikiLeaks and Julian Assange have been exposing. It's the financial tyranny that we're all subject to that makes us have to live under debt peonage, whether we work in an office, whether we work at home, whether we work just to take care of our kids, to just put food on the table. So
Oh,
I think that goes into, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So I mean, this is another thing Chomsky had spoken about, which is that the student debt system is very much part of the oppressive mechanisms we've been discussing, and I think you were pointing to that. But debt becomes so prohibitively, like devastatingly, soul-crushingly high, that what do people preoccupy themselves with but searching for the kind of work that is most incentivized. In other words, the least likely to focus on people's self-determination. In other words, what I was characterizing as the financial abuse of abstractions. Whereas, I don't know, I carry a lot of student debt from law school. And I got to say that I've had to live on the fringes of consciousness and tremendous anxiety after that, right? And dedicate myself to these kinds of things. It is not uncomfortable, and literally it has made me physically sick. I'm just constantly a sickly boy. And so anyway, yeah.
It's
I
good
think
to
it
have
does
you
that.
in the
Stress
club.
does that. Stress does that. I mean, they want, and that's by design. They want everybody to be stressed out and tired and freaked out and on edge, because you're much easier to sell things to that way, for one. And also you're much easier to control.
Yeah.
You don't have time to think, you don't have time to do anything but just survive. And so they can do whatever they want, and you're
Yeah.
not paying any attention whatsoever.
And we've talked about this in previous shows. That's the capitalist system by design. It didn't just happen that way. It's designed that way. And it's been designed that way since capitalism, as Marx called it, became a revolutionary force that now pervades all aspects of our lives. And it's designed to keep us tired, to keep us unencouraged, to distract us. And we have to fight against that. And
Oh yeah, I mean, literally in February, I went to the ER twice. I had developed both a staph infection and shingles on the same area of my leg, and at the ER, they said, "Oh, maybe you should meet with a psychiatrist." I'm like, I have no need for that. I'm just like really stressed.
yeah,
And so actually, interestingly enough, right, they'll say it's just a condition, shingles, that affects older people. But during the pandemic, this ER doctor had said we've seen a rash of them in very young people. And I should just say, in February, things were particularly stressful. And my partner at the time, was like, you got to take it easy. But I just
yeah.
can't stop. And it literally made me feel far more ill than I'd ever experienced. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of that. I think everybody's extremely, and look at what they've been able to get away with during this time. Look at the extreme transfer of wealth to like the top 1%, or really just like the point something, maybe 0.1% or some shit. But yeah, that they can get away with that because you don't have time. Who has time to come home and like do legitimate research or reading into what's actually happening? Nobody has time for that because it's really difficult to find that information. Everything is algorithmically fucked. You cannot find truth or it's all bullshit. It's all propaganda. You're force fed it constantly. Again, constantly.
But I want to be clear about something. This may sound like I am miserable, but actually I've never felt happier in my life. In other words, fulfilled. And this work may not feed the pocketbook, if you will, but I think it is an answer to the human condition, sort of drawing yourself into the grander scheme of things. I have made myself sick quite a few times, but that's just like the experience of my body. Maybe this sounds a little new agey, but I just got to say, it has been an extremely exhilarating past few years, particularly during the pandemic. But yeah, so.
And
Yeah.
if you put it in the perspective of the people we stand in solidarity with, people who can't walk out of the room or away from the computer, who, like Julian, are stuck in a dungeon, or Yemenis who have to live under the constant threat of hellfire missiles being shot down at them and obliterating their families, and starvation. Yeah, like we can walk away in a sense, or take a break or decompress, and they can't. But I'm just saying that to add to the point that you're making, that it doesn't necessarily make me happy, but I'd rather know and focus on this stuff and do like what minuscule part I can do to contribute to stopping it that I can, than not know. Or
it's
to
a
know,
very weird feeling though, right? Like
to know and not do anything.
Right. But it's a weird
feeling
to like, part of me loves what I do. And I do get a lot of fulfillment out of it, but the other part of me hates it extremely because it's very depressing and it's hard and it's traumatic at times. I know that sounds a little dramatic, but it is traumatic at times. And it's, it's soul crushing, but it's also really I've met some of the best people, and I have been able to fight alongside them against this unbelievably important issue, or cause, or whatever the hell word you want to use for it. But it's amazing, but you're right. It's like this weird,
Sure. I mean, okay, so
love-hate relationship.
this is interesting too. So I mean, you guys had, I mean, you had referred to happy. You had mentioned you're not sure you're happy. I should just say this is an interesting set of circumstances where I think there is a linguistic disconnect. When I use the word happy, I doubt most people appreciate this. It is very much a relative term. It is very Camusian. Are you familiar with the myth of Sisyphus?
Yes.
So the story about the man who rolls the rock up the hill only to see it roll back down at the end of time, and he must do that for the rest of time.
Did you say Camus? You're talking about Camus' essay?
Yeah, Camus'
Okay.
essay, and so in the beginning, right, he's operating like in a narrative, capacity against the backdrop of fascism, the obliteration of identity, which I think is kind of comparable to a lot of people's experience today. And what does he do? He writes stories and communicates words to allow people to reconstruct their narratives. But the beginning of the book is a meditation on suicide. Then there is an alternative to suicide, and then you get to the seemingly hopeless, absolutely fucked situation where Sisyphus rolls the rock up the hill. But the last line is, we must think of Sisyphus to be happy. And the idea there is like there is honor in the struggle, and people are able to recontextualize, reframe their experience of existence such that they don't have to succumb to the fascistic obliteration of identity. Right. And how is that executed? It's through, right, one subjective manipulation of reality and the finding of meaning in things. And when I say like drawing myself into the grander scheme of things, that allows me to understand, even though I am not starving in Yemen or in Gaza in an open air prison, possibly there is an abstract similarity insofar as there is like an assault on the spirit across the board with many people. And so when I look at even abstract similarities, I think, actually it's not that random, and there are people who would function in solidarity. And that's that love you had mentioned, right? I have actually never felt more loved than the people in Assange defense. And, I guess, yeah. So when I say happy, I mean the ability to derive meaning from existence despite all of this shit.
Yeah.
And in many ways, Julian is very much like the existentialist authors, Camus and whatever. And so far as there's the circulation of language and then the reconstructive of narrative and oppressed peoples who need access to information, and otherwise they would not have that ability. Does this make any sense?
Yeah, and there's also, I'm thinking of Camus, but I think your application of Camus to Assange is quite appropriate. There's a practicality to it, but it's not a clinical practicality. It's a lyrical practicality that's based on what we all go through, or to different extents in life, the existential crises we all face. And I think that's why Julian's been so effective and WikiLeaks has been so effective in communicating what they're communicating, because it, as Misty has said, it goes to the practicality of it. They've gotten it right. These are the facts. You can't dispute it. And I think although Camus was more philosophical in his approach, there was that practicality, that straightforwardness. I mean, you could see it in his language, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I also just want to say, I in no way want to devalue the experience of people who are actually subject to genocide. As in
somebody will twist that around, just so you know. Somebody will absolutely just fuck them.
Yeah, no, okay. I just, I
deal with that a lot. So yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I'm not subject to genocide by Israeli authorities. I'm not a Palestinian in Gaza, obviously, right? I'm in Chicago and living in a nice place, but I don't know, victimization occurs in many respects, very different with them, but I don't know, just understand.
I think you're just trying to equate the human experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing too.
And we shouldn't let people who say, well, because you live in privilege, you have no right to say anything about those who are suffering. That always, people who don't care or don't want to care, or whatever their point of view is, they always try to hammer that into you that, what do you have to complain about? Your life is fine. Well, that's the whole point. I'm kicking and screaming is because I have the privilege to, for the people who don't have the privilege to. And once you know about something, if you want to forget about it or block it out, that's up to you. But I couldn't live like that. And I'm sure either of you couldn't live like that. So I just really despise this point of view from people who are just nihilistic. Like, well, what are you complaining about? You don't live in Gaza. Who cares about what happens in Gaza? Why are you so concerned about people who live in Gaza?
Yeah, and I mean,
They're human beings. That's why.
Right.
would people prefer that I not try to develop at least some form of either intellectual or emotional, spiritual intimacy with the experience of other people, and then experience apathy, right? And maybe that's the alternative, and maybe the incentive behind people saying, like, what do you have to say? I mean, it's a choice I make. It causes me to stay up at night and drives me through maddening hours. But I actually think it's a very good thing. And then the other thing too is, I mean, by virtue of how WikiLeaks has released documents from every country, and then also I don't really think of. I mean, honestly, I don't know that Julian would really acknowledge or legitimize the existence of borders. Honestly, I get the sense that he is very much about human experience, oppressed people's experience. And I don't know that I consider him so much a political actor as very much a human advocate. Actually, I remember I think it was Alex Gibney's documentary "We Steal Secrets" when he was identified by some academic in there as a humanitarian anarchist, as opposed to I'm not sure about the anarchist part, but he's very much a humanitarian. And it's just I'm not sure people appreciate that humanness in him.
Yeah,
well, that's
I
been
think that's a
stripped
good
away
point.
from him through propaganda. I mean, they've been very effective at completely dehumanizing him and you know what I mean? He's seen as like a caricature. He's been, if people know about him at all, which most people have just never heard of him, or like they're like, oh yeah, I've heard that name before. But a vast majority of people just have no clue, because our mainstream media does not talk about Julian Assange ever. It does not happen. And if they do, it's like a very quick blurb, like it's over and done with. Like, I don't know. Did any of them cover the 2-year anniversary? Did any of them cover the anniversary of collateral murder? Did any of them cover the trial? Did any of them? No, not really. I mean, they may have had a couple blurbs. I think in one day, I think it was The Guardian. They covered Johnny Depp's divorce thing. They did 4 stories in one day, and that's more stories than they did on Julian Assange the entire 3 weeks in September.
And what is he? A movie star, right? Someone who appears on the silver screen, almost
right.
in the Socratic Platonic cave. We stare at these images, right, with no awareness of what exists beyond them. And again, right, like that journalist for the New York Post, referring to the movie star Benedict Cumberbatch. So Johnny Depp and his issues are apparently take precedence.
And what's an interesting contrast is that WikiLeaks is focused solely on facts, but when the mainstream press covers WikiLeaks, it has nothing to do with facts. It's speculation and
lies,
gossip, backroom gossip, palace intrigue. It never has anything to do with the facts.
Anonymous sources
whatsoever.
Say Julian Assange is an asshole.
Basically. And so I think that's a very glaring juxtaposition, and also points to what Assange and WikiLeaks have been trying to point out for so long, is that the mainstream media is basically neuter.
Broken.
Neuter
and broken.
And you can see it in the way they just cover Julian Assange. I mean, it's not like it's reading nothing that resembles fact, and it's all just like reading.
Look at the way they covered Palestine and Israel.
Yeah, I mean, there
were clashes, you guys. It was clashes.
I've been going on
defending
and on
themselves
on Twitter about that, because the language manipulation is insane.
It is.
Oh, I watched this well, I guess it was an interview with Professor Finkelstein, Norman Finkelstein, on Democracy Now! From a number of years ago, where he was discussing ways to justify international aid from the U.S. to enhancing the Iron Dome, right? The missile system that Israel will use. But he was discussing how there's like a hyperbolization of military technology. We can put it in quotes. Hamas is in possession of. More or less, he was saying that what is often fired and then lands in very few places in the Negev desert, causing minimal damage, they're glorified fireworks. In other words, like bottle rockets. I imagine there are exceptions, but and he may have been exaggerating, but the overblowing of the the exaggeration of damage caused by what comes out of Gaza is a significant manipulation of presentations of ideas, right, to kind of reinforce this sort of genocidal system in the Middle East.
It's narrative control, and one of the best narrative controllers coming out of Israel is Mark Regev, Regev. Regev, sorry. And the fuck is Ev? And he used to be, I think he used to be the military spokesman, and now he's the spokesman for Bibi. But this guy is, watch the way he speaks, and he's an elision artist. It's not what he says, it's what he doesn't say. And he does it so smoothly that if you don't know anything about what's happening in Palestine, what Israel has been doing to Palestine, you listen to this guy and you're like, oh, he's such a smooth talker. He can't possibly be wrong, as he, gives his soliloquy from a hill in Jerusalem while Gaza is being bombed in the background. So again, it goes back to the narrative control. And I was reading this Wall Street Journal piece earlier today, and it's referred to the Gaza Strip as an isolated strip of land. That's all it is anymore. It's an isolated strip of land. Not even saying if anybody lives there or not. It's like, well, Antarctica is an isolated strip of land too. And it's, it's this sort of blackout, this like redaction of human lives that keeps this going. And I don't know. I mean, we can just keep doing what we're doing, and that's
I know. How do you fight back against it though? Because seriously, you can't even get people to recognize that this is what's happening and that they're being lied to. I mean, if you just getting people to like recognize that their first reaction to anything that they're told on mainstream media or by the establishment, the government, the deep state, whatever you want to call them, your starting position should be they're lying, and go from there. But people they just believe everything that they're told. And if you question that narrative, then you're crazy and you're a conspiracy theorist, and you're, I mean, it's fucking fascinating. And what I find fascinating is like, it's not like we don't know that they do it. We have plenty of evidence, historical references that how many times do they get to lie to you? How many times do they get to lie to you and get caught lying to you before you're like, oh, maybe I should be skeptical of this shit. Maybe I should question it. Maybe I should, not take this at face value. That should be the starting off point, but that's not for just way too many people.
Yeah. My favorite so far has been from a Reuters piece, which called the Al-Aqsa Mosque a holy compound. A holy compound.
Compound connoting something militant? Maybe?
Yeah. What the hell is a holy compound?
Yeah, I mean,
it makes it sound very David Koresh, Branch Davidians.
Exactly. I was going to say that. Exactly. And it's a way to sort of bastardize the Palestinians in the sense of, well, they're not just worshiping there as a mosque at the third holiest site in Islam. There's got to be some kind of Hamas connection. There's got to be some kind of weapon storage going on. That's the insinuation of the word compound. And they will never, ever in the Western press abandon that. It's like compulsive.
It's really odd. I've been to Temple Mount twice. What is remarkable is that it is extremely loud down on like Via Dolorosa or the Western Wall. All of that is just, it's nuts, right? At Via Dolorosa, apparently Jesus walked to his death or whatever, and there are all this commercial activity and people are yelling and screaming. But when you go up to Temple Mount, I don't know how it falls so silent, and it's just so incredibly peaceful. And I just saw many Muslim men praying on rugs, and actually the mosque, which I couldn't enter, right? I'm not Muslim, that is understandable, but it is eerily peaceful, right? Strange inversion of the narrative around, right? Palestinians as necessarily militant. But yeah, I mean, I hope that makes some sense. Maybe it's unnecessary to mention that, but.
No, it makes perfect sense, because Israel likes to start the clock whenever it does. And it started the clock with Hamas firing rockets in this latest war that Israel has waged on Palestinians. But that's not where it really started. It started with the storming of Al-Aqsa, which Ariel Sharon did in 2000, which sparked the second Intifada. And it's like the same behavior from the bully that never learns. And I don't know if this is going to spark a third Intifada, but more to the point of what you said, we never get that description of Al-Aqsa. We get that it's just a throng of Muslims, of Palestinians. They're just there. They're bowing down and going crazy while they pray to Allah. And it's just not the reality of the situation, but we're so far removed from it that it's impossible to know unless somebody like you, for example, who's been there, tells the truth about it. And that's the whole, I think, crux of this conversation is the truth.
Yeah. That's what we're all kind of fighting for, I think, for sure. Yeah, I don't know, but Eric, I know you're sick, dude. So I'm gonna let you bounce out of here.
Sure.
Because I feel bad making you sit here all.
Oh no, I mean this actually makes me forget that I feel sick.
Okay.
I may be sniffling or whatever, but actually
I was sitting here feeling guilty. Like every time you cough, I'm like, oh.
No, I mean this kind of mitigates the sort of
the pain and suffering. It's a distraction. Distractions are always good when you're sick.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, it was nice to meet you. I've met you, obviously, Misty.
Yeah, nice to meet you too, Eric.
Yeah, it would be nice
to be for joining us.
To be in touch some way. I don't know if
yeah, Misty sent me your Twitter handle, so I will.
Yeah, you guys can.
I'll hit you up on there.
All right, cool.
Yeah, but I also would love to do some organizing and stuff with you at some point. I'm trying to like make it to different locations so that we can try to build up, I think we're seeing a surge in interest, so we got to try to capitalize that on every way that we can. So I'm excited for the Shiptons to come for sure. It would be cool if I could make it out to Chicago. That's not super far for me. It's only like 6 hours.
I get to meet you. I get to meet you in person.
Yeah, no, I love meeting people in person, which is weird because I'm kind of antisocial, sort of like I'm just awkward. But yeah, like I love when we've been in DC and stuff, being able to meet people in person is really cool. Being able to like walk through the city or the streets of DC chanting "fuck the CIA" with my comrades, that was fun.
Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on, even though you have a cold and aren't feeling all that great. Is there anything that you have coming up that you want to?
Oh, well, the details for assignments I'll be handling in regard to the Shiptons visits. A visit is, won't be disclosed to me entirely until tomorrow in the meeting with Nathan.
I'm in the same position.
Yeah, no, it would be very helpful just towards mobilizing 4 more people in Chicago during that time if I could somehow move information about that through your guys' channels. But
I can tweet about it.
Yeah. I'll send you some information. I'll have a better sense tomorrow at the end of the day. Anyway, I guess I'll talk to you guys later. Is the recording of this hitting your YouTube tomorrow, or how does that work?
I'm going to post it tonight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm going to work on getting it posted after we wrap up. So it'll hit both our Rockfin and YouTube channels.
Rockfin usually first. We try to do Rockfin first.
Yeah, so I will tweet that out as soon as it's up. So
and tag you.
Oh, cool.
And tag you, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Cool. Well, thanks again for coming on. I appreciate it. Thanks everybody for hanging out and watching. And we'll catch you next time.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
Eric.